Hello there, you Awakening Wonders. Thanks for joining me, Russell Brand, for Stay Free with Russell Brand, live in DC. Later on today in this show, this very show, I'll be talking to Marjorie Taylor Greene. Wherever you're watching us, you might be watching us on Rumble Premium. Remember, that helps me. If you ain't got Rumble Premium yet, get Rumble Premium now. I'm financially rewarded for that, as well as it being reassuring for my family's future in an economic time of strife, trouble, chaos, disillusionment, fracture, and diaspora, which are some of the things I'll be talking about, yes, with Marjorie Taylor Greene. Is she the kind of politician that we need, i.e. she has integrity, she's kind of earthy, she's connected to her voter base, her demographic, her constituency? We'll be talking about all of that. Let me know what you think in the comments and the chat. Remember, on the show tomorrow from DC, we've got Dr. Oz, head of the CMS, and his wife Lisa Oz joining us in studio to talk about the complexity of Maha principles in government. If your personal health, spiritual and psychological sovereignty is contingent on the falling of many behemoths, on the capture and fall of many leviathans, what chance is there for it happening? Also, what we're going to be talking about today with Charles Eisenstein, whose influential book, Sacred Economics, really preempted the cryptocurrency revolution and indicated that even financial and fiduciary exchange ought be undergirded with spiritual goodwill. If there are any of you kind of crypto bros out there, let me know what you think about that in the comments and chat. And if you're watching us on YouTube or X or any of those places, get on over to Rumble, where we can talk freely about Barack Obama and the recent revelations around the Russia hoax. Join us here where we can talk about AOC. Marjorie Taylor Greene's just outright calls her a fraud. You're going to love that kind of stuff, I reckon, aren't you guys? But remember, come to Rumble to watch this show, because YouTube is restrictive. It's part of the Trusted News Initiative. It's ultimately an arm of legacy media that controls and constricts your ability to even receive truth, let alone understand it, if such a thing were possible. Now, Charles, if you could get on mic for us. One of the things that, like we've chatted a few times when I've seen you in and around the Kennedy campaign when he was still running as an independent, and even when he made his extraordinary and now, or one would have to argue, successful alliance with the Trump administration. But before that, many people will be familiar with your writing, Sacred Economics in particular. But when you wrote that book, sort of long essay on coronavirus, I thought it was a kind of a pivotal moment, certainly in my own understanding, where you identified that what coronavirus had brought to the forefront, if I'm understanding what you wrote correctly, was a kind of inability for us to address mortality because of a sort of spiritual crisis at the heart of our, culture, even beyond America. A pandemic by its nature is global. Where do you think that crisis, that spiritual crisis, that inability to process death, that inability to accept reality is now? Now that we have Trump in office, now that we have Secretary Kennedy, as head of the HHS, now that we have the disappointment and disillusionment of the Epstein file, that peculiar synecdoche that essentially stands for "you didn't let us know about the baddies," and the Gates and the Clintons and the Obamas and all of their occultist practices. What was revealed in COVID, and where is that revelation now that Trump is not a sort of a renegade a totem of nationalist and populist and interest, but he is the president of the United States and a man with significant power, seemingly still controlled by some of the interests that would have existed if Kamala Harris was in office?
That's an awful lot.
Yeah, I know, but you've got ages. You can take a long time to answer, and you can ponder it. Plus, you could use the time when I'm asking the questions to think of a few.
Well, you're so entertaining to listen to that it paralyzes all thought. I hope you put that to good use sometimes.
I've used to actually use it to sleep around a lot, but it turns out that I should have been more circumspect about how that could be utilized subsequently.
Yeah. One thing I'll say, Trump, as his name indicates, a trump card in a deck is a wild card, a joker, which can be any card. Mm. So he's almost like custom made to be a projection screen for what, like, the actual man Trump, who he is very different than the totality of all the projections of what he is. And that lends him very well to mythological narratives. So one of these narratives is the archetype of disclosure, where all of the secrets, all of the truth, all of the secret history is going to be made plain, all of the crimes. And we're finally going to have justice. We're going to know who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. And we're going to understand how the world works because the shadows will have been revealed. I don't think that that day is ever going to come until we are psychologically and spiritually prepared for it.
Man, the archetype of disclosure, I was about to say, well, what is that? And then I thought Hermes and stealing Apollo's cattle and Prometheus stealing fire and any mythic figure that has granted fire stolen from the gods and given it to the population. I suppose that is that archetype. Now, I myself in my own musings have considered that Trump, like that, I know what I projected on Trump. I know why I became and remain to a point enamored of Trump. In the same, my more towards Trump is no different than any one of a billion metropolitan Democrat intellectuals that would say, well, you know, we know the Democrats ain't great, but they're the best of the best, least worst option, all that kind of stuff. I came to realize during the campaign, Trump is a bulwark and an obstacle to globalist imperialist interests, which, if not interrupted now, I believe could reach a kind of Huxley-esque, Orwellian, and perhaps most alarmingly of all, Kafkaesque level of bureaucratic control, where the fugue of their compassion will consume us all, and we will all be carrying ID, and we will all be inoculated from everything, perhaps, but breathing, and maybe on some occasions that. And what I personally projected onto Trump was, this guy is anti-media, which he is, you know, like he certainly understands media very well. When he's saying you can't trust the media, they're liars, and I'm a person who feels like I've been lied about by media, I'm like, yeah, there he goes, my guy. Now, it's not like as simple as that, because I admire his entrepreneurialism, I enjoy his rhetorical style, I enjoy his sense of humor, and I respect the office of the President of the United States. But this idea that he somehow has a set of attributes that allow us to project onto him, do you think that all political leaders have that, or do you think that's particular and unique?
It's especially true of him. But, you know, I think one thing that COVID did is it really, for a lot of people who hadn't questioned normality before, it really dissolved the veil and showed us, like, people were had like a deep-seated anxiety about the direction of our civilization, and COVID kind of gave us a preview of where we were going anyway. You know, the trend toward more and more of life happening online, the trend toward fear and technocratic control, the distancing of human beings, the migration of shopping, education, dating, conversation onto digital media. Like, none of that started in 2020. These are all trends that have been going on for a long time. So it kind of showed, COVID gave us a preview of where we were headed and said, is this what you actually want? Because this is where we have been on autopilot going. And by making an unconscious choice conscious, it actually gives us a choice. And a lot of people, you know, welcomed the interruption of normality that happened with the first lockdowns. But underneath it, the fear narrative and the intensification of not just technologies of control, but also the mentality of, I would even call it progress, that says that human progress means that we exert more and more precise control over the body, over transactions, over, you know, economics, over human choices, over society. We put everything, this is the dream, you put everything into a data set, and then you can use essentially mathematics and predictive technologies to, prevent crime, to reduce carbon emissions, whatever your goal is, you have, as long as everything is surveilled and accounted for, then you know what to do. But what is the purpose of life? Is it to be as safe as possible until you die? And this is what you were talking about before, like the phobia of death and the avoidance of death and the pretense that we're not going to die that comes through in the obsessive worship of youth, the sequestering of old people away in nursing homes, the euphemisms, and the regime of safety that is used to justify everything, which is also fundamental to fascism.
Yes.
Fascism is also about security and finding something. See, you have to find something external to control, to fight against, to dominate, in order to gather the fascistic us. You need a them. And so that could be a virus. It could be, a racial or ethnic minority. It could be immigrants. Right and left both do this. It could be right-wing extremists. But the basic pattern is, let me tell you who the bad guys are. That's the first step. Once the ringleader, the bully, has pointed the finger at the bad guys, then mob psychology does the rest. And nobody dares get close to you, Russell, because you have been tainted. You've got cooties. You even an accusation is enough, because then all of us have this like grade school level instinct to stay away from you. Like, I got flack when I was first on your podcast a number of years ago. People were like, you were on a podcast with the same guy who also interviewed, Jordan Peterson. Please denounce and repudiate Russell Brand so that I can stay associated with you, because you now have his cooties, because he has Jordan Peterson's cooties. And now, I've got Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s cooties and he has Trump's cooties. So it is unsafe to be associated with you. And now, because I'm talking to you, with me.
This cooties pandemic that we're going to have to tackle, I suggest a vaccine. We've clinically trialed it on up to 8 mouses. Moderna will be releasing the cooties vaccine any moment now. It does have some side effects, a little bit of myocarditis. You might get some dizzy spells, and you might find that you don't have the ability to get, maintain, or even look at an erection. But all these things are a small price to pay for sweet lady freedom. Now, I've got a lot of questions for you, Charles, and here they are. It's going to come in the form of a great big long monologue. If you're watching us on YouTube or X or wherever you're watching us, make your way to Rumble Premium. Remember, if you get Rumble Premium, it really helps me in a variety of ways. We'll stay on YouTube for a moment longer and X for a moment longer, because I want to put this question to you and provide some additional context for those of you watching and those of you chatting. Let me know if you have any comments, or, well, obviously comments you're going to just do freely, you free speech advocates, you raconteurs, you maniacs, you lunatics, you dinglings. This is what I want to say. Charles comes from a sort of, I don't know about this if I'm characterizing you correctly here, but this is how I encountered you in the culture. You're kind of one of them intellectuals that emerged out of an era that kind of brought together ayahuasca, psychedelics, new for understanding of technology, a sort of nouveau shamanism, an attempt to sort of extract meaning out of this increasingly nihilistic world. When you were offering, and I know that, you have a particular kind of contamination. Yeah, you've got cross-pollinated now, because you've got RFK cooties, you've got RB cooties. You are a kind of menagerie of viruses at this point, Charles. But in a sense, I always saw your kind of natural home as you're an intellectual. You're an accredited intellectual. You're sort of a liberal, progressive intellectual. Something very strange happened in our culture a little while ago. And I don't feel like the pieces have really coalesced well enough yet for us to make out the mosaic and new patterns that may emerge from this endless fracturing of taxonomies and this tumbling of false idols. This is what I feel, is what this safety control dynamic that you're describing, that we can keep you safe. There's a peculiar eschatological position that's being taken here, that when you deny God, part of what you do is you sort of somehow attempt to replace God, that there is a requirement for God. And I know of apologists, notably Joseph Boot, who makes the claim that the state, and of course, that the state, in its secular claim that there is no God, that God is dead, is attempting to replace that very God that it is renouncing and claiming doesn't exist. And in the following ways, some of the things you said in your first answer, other than the repeated use of the term cooties, which I didn't allow to diminish the tone of the whole show, is you talked about worship, you talked about fear of death, you talked about purpose and meaning. In this visit to DC, I've also going to be having, and had a conversation with Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. That's coming up in a minute. But we've also spoken to the head of the CMS, Dr. Oz, and his wife, Lisa Oz, who's running the Maha movement. I know you were affiliated with the Maha movement and moment. And that was very extraordinary, I think. And with the more objective media, I think it would have been noted that something strange was happening when a figure as marginal, peripheral, and controversial as Robert Kennedy, a man who has said, who's allowed himself to be affiliated with an idea such as it's possible that vaccines contribute to childhood autism. We should examine that. A man who is a lawyer, has taken from some pretty significant corporations to court and has won. A person who's, when I read The Real Anthony Fauci, Charles, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe someone is saying this about Anthony Fauci, and then have stood back in near awe as more and more of Kennedy's claims in that book have been proven to be true. Now, there's a lot I want you to unpack here, but I see now that your answers are as long as my questions, so I feel kind of safe. And what I want you to touch upon is what's happened to this sort of. There are now people that still claim to be kind of almost metropolitan intellectuals, avant-garde intellectuals, and they're still ultimately, in a sense, carrying water for the Obama administration. We all knew that the Russia hoax stuff would have had powerful figures behind it. We all know or intuit or sense that even if there is no literal Epstein list, and maybe even if there weren't literal occultist sex parties, it's, Ghislaine Maxwell's in prison for something. Jeffrey Epstein killed himself for something or was evacuated from that place. We all sense that there are elite institutions that are corruptly contributing not only to our personal incarceration, but maybe even the manifestation of deep evil. The liberal left, that's over, isn't it? That's not happening anymore. There are a few people sort of shivering back there in the caves, unwilling to leave, pointing fingers at you, notably, actually. What's happened to Charles Eisenstein? Why is he hanging out with, whether it's Russell Brand or Bobby Kennedy or whoever? But what I say is populism now is we have to popularize whatever messages we believe to be true. And surely can we, Lord, trust the technology we have now to disseminate and proliferate the message, allow, as the right-wing folks would say, the marketplace of ideas to succeed. And personally, I've become baptized, I've returned to Christ, and I kind of experience and receive given the nature of our relationship and the nature of this conversation, a kind of psychedelic, vivid, living Christ that is talking about consciousness itself, is talking about the light itself. On the crucifix, we don't have to live in the undifferentiated, primordial superstate of potentiality that shamans and druids might do well in. But some of us that are easily defeated by the flesh, that are easily defeated by the world, that are easily defeated by mental demons, we need to cling to that cross. And in fact, why take the chance of clinging? Now me on, baby. So I wonder what you feel is going to be the revivifying movement in this weird death cult moment. I wonder what you feel about the position of the intellectual left, the direction of the Democrat Party, the significance of Maha, and we're going to be going to an advert after that. So hit us, Charles.
Well, gosh. First, I might just say
there might be things you want to argue with as well. Yeah, you don't need to accept it.
That we do live in a kind of a secular religion, and its priesthood would be the people we call scientists and doctors, who administer the rituals that draw from their religious metaphysical views and contribute to those. For example, the metaphysical views, basically, these are the religious doctrines of the scientific rational worldview that you and I grew up in, and that seemed to be the very essence of enlightened thought. It's that reality is something objective, that things that happen either happen or they don't happen, independent of our consciousness, that everything real can be quantified, that there is no intelligence operating outside of what we humans impose upon the world. We are the source of intelligence, but the events of the world are just the random concatenations of force and mass, atoms and void, bouncing around according to mathematical laws. Therefore, progress means the progressive colonization of an empty, meaningless universe with human intelligence. And this religion has really been dissolving because its promises have not been manifested. The promises of social and technological utopia. I mean, we were supposed to have, have conquered all disease and eliminated crime and eliminated poverty and be living in a paradise by now. But instead, this is what's fueling the populism you talked about. Things are actually getting worse and worse, even when the numbers say they're getting better and better. But when, the average child in America spends something like 7 minutes a day outdoors unsupervised, when addiction and depression and autoimmunity are at epidemic levels, then no matter what the numbers say about GDP and educational attainment and poverty and all those kind of things, like we know something is wrong here.
Yes.
And it goes all the way to the foundation. So a lot of people are turning toward either new or ancient religions, other views of the world. And the primary thing, whatever, whether you're like a, new age shamanistic pagan or have returned to Orthodox Christianity, what all of those have in common is that they understand that there is an intelligence in all things, that this isn't just a random accident, and therefore that the purpose of life isn't simply to survive it. I mean, if there is no purpose to life, if meaning and purpose are something that human beings invent, then there's nothing left but to pretend that that's not true and to survive.
Or create some sort of perpetual orgasm machine. That's what you could do, is a machine that got you to a state of orgasm, then kept you there, because all you've got is pleasure,
I tried that,
maximum pleasure.
I tried that, but that became hell after a while.
Yes,
I couldn't escape it. I couldn't turn the machine off.
No.
Yeah.
Sometimes the machine talks back. I mean, it's an absolute, it's a nightmare scenario, really, Charles, the old orgasm machine, as was the heroin machine. All of the machines don't work. Don't trust the machines. So, yeah, in the end, you're left either with hedonism, nihilism. It doesn't take you to a good place. And also, even when you were describing chaos, you talked about mathematical laws. And so the evidence, the hieroglyphic poetry of intelligence is all about us, endless redolent miracles in golden scales.
This started to break down in the 60s and 70s when chaos theory and the idea of emergence in nonlinear dynamic systems came about, where order comes from chaos everywhere. Life is an innate property of the universe, and God is in everything. So this is what we're all coming to understand that there is, if there is an intelligence operating outside of ourselves, then our purpose is no longer to dominate the rest of reality, but to participate in that intelligence and to ask, how can I serve that which wants to be born?
Serve. Yeah, it's serve. Hey, thanks, Charles. Hey, what we're going to do now, if you're watching us on YouTube, get ready for Marjorie Taylor Greene. She is coming up. You can fire that graphic, Dylan, if you can find it, if you've got it. That's a 30-second countdown, because YouTube, you bastard, we're leaving you. And why wouldn't we leave you after all the deception and your participation in rumor-mongering and skullduggery and propaganda and filth and the way you use that algorithm? You should be ashamed of yourself. Rumble, we don't even have an algorithm. You come over here. If you're doing well, you'll be rewarded. If you ain't got Rumble Premium yet, get Rumble Premium now. And if you want to see Marjorie Taylor Greene really sort of quite aggressively attacking AOC, then join us. But I think that's going to be a headline. Also, she sort of seems to suggest that she's funded by Israel, which is a good position to have hit. Hey, so not Marjorie Taylor Greene, incidentally, AOC. Come on over and join us on Rumble. Before we continue with Charles,